my daddy, but he can. We had to say mother and father. Anything else was not allowed.
So Mother was very lovely and generous, but I think she was, she had a lot on her shoulders, and she's,
Two kids like us, and
although
father.
she was never sort of sour like grandmother, I think her life was hard, and I think she was depressed
She was.
a lot of the time. And I think that's a gene that got passed down, because I know that I have some of that in me. And so I think she was affected, and I think a lot of it was because of my father, who also was a wonderful, kind, warm man.
Very generous.
Very generous, but it was just his nature. He was in charge. This is the Swiss kind of thing, and there was no way except his way. And yet he did not, I know when I wanted to play football, they weren't in favor of that, and yet he never said no. And I know when my grades came in pretty lousy, which they usually did, until I got to be about a junior in high school, I know he was disappointed because he was so scholastic, but he never punished or chewed you out, or in that sense.
Well, we had a lot of competition because all our siblings over in our relatives over in Switzerland were either the greatest in the country or the one out of four, one out of the whole Swiss community to get a scout to come over here, or they could do this and they could do everything, and they were always much better than we were, and we heard about it.
And of course, I'm sure the other disappointment is neither of us were musical. He tried to get us to play the piano,
Forced us,
made you practice. I hated it. I just wanted to be out of there, never learned, and he finally gave up on both of us. And that must have been a big disappointment for him.
Yeah, their music teacher after 6 months said, "No way, it's impossible to teach him music."
So he probably had a lot of disappointments, but he was very proud of anything you did well, and lauded you for it. And so he was a good man, very good man. And Mother was a wonderful person, warm and loving. And
Kathy Linehan, I think it's in her little, well, not little, but that book that she put together, I believe she said something about Mary was a woman who was ahead of her time or lived in the wrong time,
I was
or
just
something
gonna,
like
I
that.
was just going to bring that up without exactly. Was going to say when we were talking about her is that she was bright. She could write beautifully. She was ahead of her time. She would have been very successful as a businesswoman or something like that, and she was forced into this role of housewife, which all the women were then. So she was ahead of her time. That's what I've always thought too. And I think she would have been a lot happier if she could have broken out of that and sort of had more of a life for herself than the two stupid kids and the dictatorial Swiss father or husband.
Yeah, some of the letters that she wrote, I think it was on one of the ocean voyages, is just so, it's funny, it's so descriptive. You know, her personality just oozes out of it as you read it, those kind of things, you know. And it was called The Sun Line or something, and she says, "What sun?" And it was all raining, and going to some opera, I think it must have been in Italy or somewhere, and the
La Scala.
jewels, the jewelry was real, you know, and the women were just dripping in all these jewels, and it
They
was just,
had-
you could just picture it, you know, from her.
Father was, in the latter part of his career, was sent to Europe to be the European contact person. So they lived in Switzerland and loved that. She loved it. And they went to Italy a lot on his business. And he dealt with a man who owned a chemical factory in Italy who had a box at La Scala, which is the most famous opera house in Italy. And so they got to sit in his box, and they just loved that. They had a good time at the end of their lives together. Father had mellowed a lot, and Mother loved being in Europe. And
He-
What are your memories of the lake, being at the lake, Lake George, growing up? How did that all happen? I mean, was it just to get away from the city? That was what everyone was doing?
I think what happened is that that's what people did in that time. But I think it was Father's thing of, in Europe, they took vacations and they got out of the city, and I think he picked that Lake George because it was as close as you could get to Switzerland, and that.
Well, we used to stay at Saratoga Lake.
Yeah, that was.
And then we went up to Lake George to see the Daggets, and they, you know, it was so beautiful and so much like Switzerland. He wanted to buy some land up there, or I think the first year we rented a place. And then after that, well, during that year, everybody liked it so much that he bought some property, and
He bought an old boys camp.
yeah, and then that was too much just to build a new house, so they bought an old farmhouse overlooking the lake, and that had been converted into a nice living house. And we had a boat and went fishing, and
Motorboat, little inboard motorboat, and a dock. We put the dock in every year. The freezing lake.
in Memorial Day, we put it in, and you go in for 3 minutes, you have to come out and warm up. And,
I mean, the ice water in that lake was just very, very cold. And but it was, I mean, what a place to go. I mean, it was gorgeous to start with, and having a boat, you know, we water skied and cruised, and which idyllic.
and the water was so pure you could drink it. We drank it, everybody drank it, and it was an ideal place to go in the summertime.
This may be continued.
To be continued.
Let's pause.
I think we've pretty much covered what if it was.
So from the tie-in,
Okay, the tie-in, going to parties on different weekends. And there was this one time in particular, I believe it was back in 1948 or 49, and I met some people that I had never met before. Number one was John Mosinger, and some friends of his, and also I believe they were relatives of Virginia Burley, the Kingsley twins. And during the course of the evening, we decided, a group of us, that it would be nice to go to the Rutland Fair together. So the following week, I believe it was, there must have been about 8 of us. We went to Rutland, had a great time going on all the rides and just wandering around. And then the next thing was John attended Union College. It was his last year, I believe, there. And he invited me down for, well, I guess it was a football game at Union. And I took the train, went to Albany, and stayed in a hotel there. Had a nice weekend. And then things just sort of developed. I would drive down once in a while, 2 different occasions, I believe, and give John a ride back up, and he'd stay at the hotel, the inn rather. And we saw quite a bit of each other. And that following summer, it was just a very nice relationship. We'd see each other and write. And in July of 1950, we were married. And we went on a honeymoon. We went to the Thousand Islands. And Dad let us borrow his car. And then we lived, when we came back, we stayed in a little cottage that John's parents owned at the lake. And then we got an apartment over Tony Fertino's. And then I had a very pleasant thing happen to me. I had a lovely little daughter, and it seemed as if my life finally took on meaning. I was very happy. And I used to take, Mother bought me quite a few things, and a baby carriage, and I used to take strolls down to the tie-in, and Mother was very proud, and I'd always dress my daughter Paula up in cute little outfits, and Mother would show her to everyone. And at that time, we'd also established the habit of going there to eat on Sundays. And then we bought a home on Champlain Avenue, and everything just seemed very, very nice, because I loved working outside. I planted flowers around the edges of the house, and had nice neighbors. Mrs. Gunning was next door neighbor, and there again, it was quite a little walk, but on a regular basis, I would wheel Paula down to the main street, down to see my mother, or just window shop. I did a lot of sewing, started doing quite a bit of sewing, which I enjoyed. I can remember that John had a Navy uniform. In the dark navy blue, I made a little snowsuit for Paula, and the material was such with the wool that it really wouldn't get wet when she would sit in the snow. But while I was sewing, she was very intrigued. She'd just sit on my lap very quietly and watch what I was doing. And then, then Jack was born Paula was born in 51, and Jack was in 54. And I can recall our house was quite large, the one on Champlain Avenue, and we made it into a 2-apartment house. And then, we were living in the upstairs apartment, and had Jack, and John's mother and father, Mary and Charles, came, and they had been traveling, so they didn't know about the birth of Jack yet, and so I can recall them coming and how pleased they were. And then we built a house. We sold our house on Champlain Avenue and moved into one of Mother's summer apartments. So during the construction, it was about a mile. Paula would walk and I'd push Jack and we'd go up and watch the carpenters working on the house. And time goes by so swiftly. But, I think that the children enjoyed their summers because then there were a lot of people around in the cottages around the lake. And there was the Villardos. The Villardos had purchased the summer houses that belonged to John's mother and father. So they were near there. And then because we lived so far out from town, and we were actually, the school zone was Putnam, they sent a taxi out to pick up Paula and Jack to take them to school. In the meantime, I don't know exactly what year it was, but Mother and Dad bought the St. Frederick. So that became a weekly journey for us to take the children and have a lovely dinner. And it taught them manners. They behaved very well, very manageable. And then the thing there too I can remember about the St. Frederick is because Dad's birthday was at Christmas time, Mother, then they left shortly after Christmas to go to Florida. They closed up the hotel, and my brother and his children, and I can recall Mayor and Father being there one Christmas, and Mother cooked the meal and was happy as could be, and children had the run of the place, and it was a very pleasant day. Paula and her cousin Vicky, I believe, stayed with Mother on a couple of occasions at the hotel. And Dad, over there, he had cancer, and they still took trips. Mother would drive. They still took a couple of trips more to Florida. And Jack and Paula and I went down there and rented a small place. Mother and Dad had a trailer in Bradenton that they went to every year. And I would go down with the children and spend some time down there in the winter. And I recall John and I drove down once with the children, and then he left us there. He spent a little time with us there. Maybe you better stop it a minute. This is all. These are things I haven't thought about in so long. He was still sick when we moved to Maine. What year was that?
62.
62 we went to Maine. I didn't hit on the other stuff that you want to see. Now I've got sidetracked.
Well, what are your memories of going to the farm up in Chilson?
Didn't I touch on